The massive viewing deck of the Galactic Council station buzzed with quiet satisfaction. Ambassador Zethkar stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the final human transport ships disappear into the dark void beyond the outer rim. The blue glow of their engines faded to nothing, leaving only the cold stars to mark their passage. "It is done," he said to the gathered diplomats behind him. His voice carried the weight of accomplished duty. "The last of them have gone." A collective sigh of relief swept through the chamber. Representatives from dozens of species nodded their approval. The Vorthak delegate clicked his mandibles in what passed for applause among his kind. The crystalline ethereals chimed softly in harmony. Even the usually silent observers flickered their biolights in apparent satisfaction. For 57 years, the human problem had plagued the Galactic Council. Ever since first contact, these strange bipeds had been nothing but trouble. They asked too many questions. They challenged established protocols. They insisted on exploring dangerous sectors that had been marked as forbidden for good reason. Worst of all, they refused to accept the careful balance of power that had kept the galaxy stable for millennia. "They were too chaotic," muttered Council Director Halvek from his floating platform. His ancient voice wheezed with age, but his words carried absolute authority. "Too unpredictable, always rushing into conflicts that did not concern them." Zethkar remembered the heated debates that had led to this moment. Humans had been caught again and again in activities that violated Council law. They established unauthorized outposts in neutral zones. They sent armed expeditions to regions specifically designated as off-limits. When questioned, they always had the same excuse. They were protecting trade routes or investigating distress signals that no one else could detect. Protection from what? The Council had demanded. The humans could never give satisfactory answers. They spoke vaguely of threats in the dark, of ancient dangers that lurked beyond the galactic rim. When pressed for evidence, they produced sensor readings that Council scientists dismissed as instrument errors or natural phenomena. The final straw had come 6 months ago. A human military fleet had engaged in combat operations in the Kelvani Nebula, a region that had been declared a protected scientific preserve. The battle damage was extensive. Entire asteroids had been vaporized. Spacetime itself showed signs of exotic weapon discharge. Yet when Council investigators arrived, they found no evidence of whatever the humans claimed to have been fighting. "We were protecting you," the human admiral had insisted during his tribunal. "All of you. You just can't see them yet." The Council had heard enough. A unanimous vote was passed. Humanity would be given 1 standard year to relocate beyond Council space. No exceptions, no appeals. They could take their ships, their people, and their paranoid delusions somewhere else. Most species had expected the humans to fight the decision. Their military was formidable, their technology surprisingly advanced for such a young civilization. Instead, they had simply nodded and begun packing. Within 11 months, every human, settlement, research station, and military outpost had been abandoned. They left behind empty structures and powered-down facilities, taking only what they could carry. "Where do you think they went?" asked the Therma delegate, her insectoid features showing curiosity. Zethkar shrugged his 4 shoulders. "It does not matter. They spoke often of colonies beyond the rim. Perhaps they found some uninhabited worlds where they can chase their imaginary enemies in peace." The gathering chuckled at his words. It was a common joke now in Council circles. The humans and their invisible threats. The brave protectors fighting monsters that existed only in their minds. "The galaxy is safer without them," declared Director Halvek. "Already our shipping lanes report fewer incidents. Trade disputes have decreased by 30%. Military skirmishes are at an all-time low." It was true. The statistics spoke for themselves. Ever since the humans had begun their exodus, galactic civilization had experienced unprecedented peace. No more reports of unauthorized military actions, no more demands for increased defense spending, no more urgent warnings about threats that Council sensors could never detect. The viewing deck began to empty as delegates returned to their duties. There were trade agreements to negotiate, territorial disputes to mediate, and scientific expeditions to plan. all the normal business of a civilized galaxy. Zethkar remained at the window, savoring the moment. His career had been made by successfully handling the human problem. The promotion to senior ambassador was already being processed. His species would remember him as the one who brought stability to the galaxy. He thought about the last conversation he had with a human representative. Captain Sarah Chen had been her name, a small woman with hard eyes who had served as their final diplomatic liaison. She had requested one last meeting before the final transport departed. "You're making a mistake," she had told him quietly. "We've been watching the rim sectors for decades. Something is stirring out there. Something that makes our worst weapons look like toys." Zethkar had smiled condescendingly. "Captain, in 3,000 years of recorded galactic history, no external threat has ever emerged from the rim territories. Your people see patterns where none exist. That's because we've been dealing with them before they could reach you," she had replied. "The rim isn't empty, Ambassador. It's a hunting ground, and now the hunters know the prey is undefended." He had dismissed her words as typical human dramatics. Now, watching the last traces of their departure fade into darkness, he felt only satisfaction. The galaxy had finally rid itself of a species that confused paranoia with vigilance, aggression with protection. In the Council archives, human warnings were already being filed away as historical curiosities. Reports of sensor ghosts in the outer sectors, claims of brief energy signatures that vanished before confirmation, theories about ancient entities that supposedly fed on stellar energy. All of it would make interesting reading for future xenobiologists studying the psychology of a species driven by irrational fears. The automated monitoring systems throughout Council space hummed quietly, maintaining their eternal watch. Deep space sensor networks tracked merchant traffic and military movements with precision. Communication relays carried messages across thousands of light years without delay. Everything functioned exactly as it should in a well-ordered civilization. What these systems did not detect were the subtle changes already beginning at the galaxy's edge. Energy patterns that human sensors would have recognized immediately were dismissed as cosmic background radiation. Gravitational anomalies that would have triggered immediate investigation by human scientists were logged as natural phenomena. Subspace distortions that human military commanders would have treated as invasion warnings were cataloged as equipment malfunctions. The galaxy continued its ancient rotation, carrying billions of intelligent beings through the void on thousands of worlds. They went about their lives in peaceful ignorance, secure in the knowledge that their leaders had made the right choice. The troublesome humans were gone. Order had been restored. In the depths of space beyond the rim, something vast and patient felt the change. Defenses that had held for decades suddenly went silent. Guardian posts that had maintained constant vigilance were abandoned. The careful perimeter that had kept ancient appetites at bay finally collapsed. For the first time in living memory, the way was clear. Zethkar finally turned away from the viewing port, satisfied with his work. Behind him, the stars continued to shine with their cold light, revealing nothing of the darkness that was already beginning to move between them. The galaxy slept peacefully, unaware that its guardians were gone and its nightmare was about to begin. 3 months after the last human ship disappeared beyond the galactic rim, Council space enjoyed a golden age of prosperity. Trade flowed freely between member worlds. Diplomatic conferences resolved disputes with unprecedented ease. Even the notoriously difficult Kythera had agreed to open their borders to scientific exchange programs. Ambassador Zethkar reviewed the monthly reports with growing satisfaction. His office on the Council station offered a perfect view of the busy shipping lanes, where merchant vessels moved in orderly lines between the stars. No more erratic course changes to avoid non-existent threats. No more emergency diversions because human patrol ships detected imaginary dangers. The shipping guilds report a 40% increase in profits, his aide informed him, reading from a data tablet. Travel times between the outer rim territories and the core worlds have decreased by 3 weeks on average. Zethkar nodded approvingly. Without humans constantly claiming that certain routes were unsafe, captains could finally use the most efficient paths through space. The direct passage through the Kelvani Nebula alone saved merchant fleets enormous amounts of time and fuel. Director Halvek had called a special session to celebrate the success of the human relocation program. Representatives from every member species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, their various forms creating a colorful display of galactic diversity. The mood was jubilant. 6 months ago, we made a difficult but necessary decision, Halvek announced, his ancient voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. Today, we can see the wisdom of that choice. Crime rates are down. Military expenditures have decreased. Our scientists report that research productivity has increased by 60%, without constant interruptions from human security concerns. The assembled delegates responded with enthusiastic approval. The ethereals chimed in harmony. The Vorthak clicked their mandibles in unison. Even the normally stoic observers flickered their biolights in what might have been celebration. But not everyone shared the general euphoria. In a small office deep within the station's scientific section, Dr. Yenna Korthak stared at her monitoring screens with growing unease. As head of the Deep Space Observation Network, she was responsible for tracking activity throughout Council territory. For the past several weeks, her instruments had been detecting anomalies that troubled her. The first sign had been subtle. Automated beacon stations along the rim territories had begun reporting equipment failures. Nothing dramatic, just gradual degradation of sensor arrays and communication systems. The maintenance schedules showed that these stations were still within their operational parameters, yet they continued to malfunction. Then came the mining operations. 3 asteroid extraction facilities in the outer sectors had gone silent over the past month. When contacted, their automated systems reported normal operations, but the actual ore shipments had stopped arriving at processing centers. Investigation teams sent to check on the facilities found them completely abandoned, with no signs of struggle or emergency evacuation. Dr. Korthak had brought these concerns to her superiors, but they seemed unconcerned. Equipment failures were normal in the harsh environment of deep space. Mining operations sometimes shut down without proper notification when ore deposits were exhausted. These things happened. What worried her most were the energy readings. Her deep space sensors had detected brief spikes of exotic radiation from beyond the galactic rim. The signatures were unlike anything in the Council's databases. They appeared for seconds at a time, then vanished completely, leaving no trace except minor distortions in local spacetime. She had requested permission to deploy investigation probes, but the Science Council had denied her application. Budget constraints, they said. The readings were probably just natural phenomena associated with stellar formation in nearby galaxy clusters. Nothing that warranted expensive deep space missions. Dr. Korthak pulled up her latest sensor logs and frowned at the display. Over the past week, the anomalous readings had been getting stronger and closer. Whatever was generating these energy spikes was moving in the direction of Council space. She thought about the humans and their constant warnings about threats from the rim territories. Everyone had dismissed their claims as paranoia, but now she wondered if they had been seeing something that Council sensors were not designed to detect. Human technology was often crude by Council standards, but it was also surprisingly versatile. Perhaps their instruments were calibrated for threats that the Council had never encountered. The communication array chimed softly, indicating an incoming priority message. Dr. Korthak accepted the transmission and found herself looking at the worried face of Captain Drell, commander of a Council patrol vessel operating near the outer rim. "Doctor, I need to report something unusual," the captain said without preamble. "We've been investigating the missing mining station in Sector 779. When we arrived, we found the facility intact but completely empty. No personnel, no emergency logs, no indication of what happened to the crew." Dr. Korthak leaned forward. "Any signs of equipment malfunction or system failure?" "That's the strange part," Captain Drell replied. "Everything was working perfectly. Life support, gravity, artificial atmosphere, all normal. The mining equipment was still running. But 300 workers had simply vanished without a trace. What about their personal belongings? Still in their quarters. Meals half finished in the cafeteria. Some of the beds hadn't even been slept in. It's like everyone just stopped what they were doing and walked out into the void." Dr. Korthak felt a chill run down her spine. "Captain, I want you to install additional sensor packages around that facility. Long-range detection arrays with quantum resonance scanners. If anything approaches that station, I want to know about it immediately." "Understood, Doctor. But I have to ask, What exactly are we looking for? She stared at her screen showing the inexplicable energy readings from deep space. I wish I knew, Captain. I wish I knew. Over the following days, more reports trickled in from the outer territories. Merchant ships reported navigation equipment failures when passing through certain sectors. Research stations complained of interference with their long-range communications. Several automated cargo haulers had failed to reach their scheduled destinations, though their tracking beacons continued to transmit normal status reports. Dr. Korthak compiled all the incidents into a comprehensive report and submitted it to the Council Security Committee. She highlighted the pattern of disappearances and equipment failures, noting that they all occurred in regions that had previously been patrolled by human forces. The committee's response was swift and dismissive. Deputy Director Krivelk himself called her to express his disappointment with her alarmist interpretation of routine technical problems. He reminded her that the Council had enjoyed unprecedented peace and prosperity since the human departure. Spreading unfounded fears about mysterious threats would undermine public confidence in Council leadership. Doctor, he said in a tone that suggested the conversation was over, I suggest you focus on maintaining our existing monitoring systems rather than chasing shadows in deep space. The galaxy is safer now than it has been in decades. Let us not invent problems where none exist. But the problems continued to multiply. Entire communication relays began going offline in sequence, creating gaps in the subspace network that connected the galaxy's civilizations. Trade routes that had operated safely for centuries suddenly became hazardous, as navigation beacons failed without explanation. In the depths of space beyond Council territory, something vast and patient continued its slow approach. It had waited so long for the barriers to fall, for the Guardians to abandon their posts. Now finally the way was clear to feed upon the abundant life that flourished in the spiral arms of this galaxy. The hunting could begin again. The refugee ship limped into Council space like a wounded animal seeking shelter. Its hull was scarred by weapons that left patterns no Council database could identify. Entire sections had been twisted into impossible geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. The vessel's distress beacon broadcast in a language that the universal translator struggled to process. Ambassador. Zethkar watched from the Council station's command center as rescue teams guided the damaged ship to a docking bay. The refugees aboard represented a species he had never seen before, though their star charts suggested they came from the outermost rim territories, far beyond the established borders of Council space. How many survivors? He asked the medical coordinator. 17, came the reply. Out of an estimated population of 3 million, the number hit Zethkar like a physical blow. 3 million people reduced to 17 survivors. What could possibly cause such devastation? The lead refugee was brought before an emergency council session within hours. The being called itself Vexthal, and its species resembled a cross between the familiar Vorthak and something entirely alien. Its carapace was cracked and discolored, showing signs of exposure to energies that should not exist. Where do you come from? Director Halvek asked through the translation matrix. Vexthal's response came in broken phrases that the computers struggled to decode. Rimworlds, beyond the spiral, home to the Kethmari for 10,000 cycles. Was home. What happened to your people? The refugee's form trembled violently. When it spoke again, the words came out in a rush of terror and desperation. The Devourers came, from the deep dark, from the spaces between spaces. They consumed everything. Stars went dark. Worlds became empty. Nothing left but cold void. Council members exchanged skeptical glances. The account sounded like the ravings of a traumatized mind, possibly suffering from radiation exposure or psychological breakdown. Can you describe these Devourers? Zethkar asked carefully. Vexthal's translator emitted sounds that had no equivalent in any known language. No words. No concepts in your speech. They are hunger given form. Entropy with purpose. They unmake reality itself. Dr. Korthak, who had been observing from the gallery, requested permission to address the refugee. Her recent reports about anomalous readings had gained new relevance in light of this testimony. How long ago did this happen? She asked. Time? Difficult to measure. 3 cycles since the first world died. The consumption spreads like plague. Each world feeds them, makes them stronger. Did anyone try to fight back? For the first time, something like hope flickered in the refugee's manner. Yes, the warriors of light came, strange beings from inner galaxy. They fought the Devourers for many cycles, held them back, built barriers of energy and metal. Zethkar felt a cold suspicion growing in his chest. Can you describe these warriors? Bipedal, soft-skinned but hard-minded. They spoke of duty and protection, said they guarded the spiral from ancient hunger. Vexthul paused, then added words that made several council members gasp. Called themselves humans. The session exploded into chaos. Delegates shouted questions and accusations in dozens of languages. The revelation that humans had been fighting some kind of war beyond the Rim territories sent shockwaves through the carefully ordered understanding of galactic politics. Director Halvik called for order, his ancient voice cutting through the noise. Are you certain these beings were human? Yes, we knew them for 50 cycles. They maintained stations throughout our sector, fought the Devourers at great cost, lost many ships and warriors. Vexthul's form sagged with exhaustion. Then they stopped coming. No more patrol ships, no more warnings. The barriers fell. The Devourers broke through. Dr. Korthak stepped forward, her face pale with understanding. When did the humans stop coming? 4 cycles passed. They sent final message. Said they were recalled. Other duties demanded their presence. Would not return. The timing matched perfectly with the Council's vote to relocate humanity beyond Council space. While the political leaders had been congratulating themselves on removing a troublesome species, that same species had been fighting to protect civilizations the Council had never even known existed. The consumption spread quickly after that. Vexthul continued. World after world went silent. Some tried to flee, but the Devourers moved faster than thought. Only we escaped, and only because human ship gave final warning before they left. Admiral Korthak, Dr. Korthak's military cousin, had been listening with growing alarm. How many worlds have been lost? All of them, the refugee replied simply. 17 sectors, hundreds of star systems, billions of lives. The Devourers grow stronger with each feeding. They move toward the spiral's heart now. The Admiral called up a tactical display showing the galaxy's outer rim. Red markers appeared where the refugees' people had maintained contact with other civilizations. Every single marker was dark, representing systems that had gone silent over the past few months. This pattern, the Admiral said slowly, matches exactly with the disappearances Dr. Korthak has been reporting. And look here. He highlighted specific regions. These were all areas where human patrol routes were most active. The implications hit the Council like a wave. Everything they had dismissed as human paranoia and aggression had been protective action against a threat beyond their comprehension. The unauthorized military activities had been battles, fought to keep nightmares from reaching civilized space. We need to contact the humans. Immediately! Someone shouted from the assembly. Floor. Send envoys to negotiate their return, called another. But Vexthul was shaking its damaged head. Too late. The Devourers have found the spiral. They taste the life within. Nothing will stop them now except... The refugee paused, struggling with concepts the translator could barely handle. The human spoke of a final option, a great burning that would seal the passages forever, but the cost would be... everything. Director Halvek's ancient face had gone completely still. How long do we have? The consumption moves toward your territory now. First the outer colonies will die, then the trade worlds, then the core systems. Unless the warriors of light return, Vexthul's form collapsed in exhaustion, unless they return with their fire. In the emergency sessions that followed, the Council faced the magnitude of their mistake. They had expelled the only force capable of protecting them from a threat they had never imagined. Worse, their own monitoring systems had been useless against enemies that existed partially outside normal space-time. Messages were immediately dispatched toward the regions where human colonies were believed to exist. But the fastest ships would take months to reach their destinations, and communication through subspace would take even longer. Meanwhile, the dark tide that had consumed the Rim territories continued its inexorable advance toward the heart of galactic civilization. Dr. Korthak returned to her monitoring station with new purpose. Her sensors, now recalibrated based on the refugees' descriptions, began detecting the true scope of what was approaching. The energy signatures she had dismissed as natural phenomena were actually the wake signatures of entities that fed on stellar energy itself. The galaxy's golden age of peace and prosperity was ending. In its place came the terrible knowledge that safety had always been an illusion, maintained by guardians who asked for nothing in return except the right to stand watch against the dark. Now the guardians were gone, and the darkness was coming home. The first colony to die was Theta Persei, a peaceful agricultural world known for its vast grain fields and gentle inhabitants. The attack came without warning, if it could even be called an attack. One moment the planet was broadcasting its daily weather reports and crop yields. The next moment there was nothing but an expanding sphere of absolute darkness, where a star system had once existed. Admiral Korthak stood in the Council's military command center, watching the real-time sensor feeds with growing horror. The destruction of Theta Persei had taken exactly 14 minutes from first contact to complete annihilation. An entire star system wiped from existence as if it had never been. What exactly hit them? Director Halvik demanded, his ancient voice cracking with strain. We don't know, Admiral Korthak admitted. Our sensors detected massive gravitational distortions, followed by what appears to be controlled stellar collapse. The star itself was consumed, converted into some form of exotic energy that we can't classify. The tactical display showed the expanding zone of destruction. 3 more systems had gone dark in the past 6 hours. The pattern was terrifyingly systematic. Whatever these entities were, they moved through space in a coordinated advance, consuming everything in their path. Where is the nearest defense fleet? Halvik asked. Admiral Zentok's 3rd Fleet is en route to intercept, Korthak replied. They should reach the destruction zone within 18 hours. They never got the chance. The 3rd Fleet, consisting of 67 state-of-the-art warships, encountered the Devourers in the Vega system. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted exactly 7 minutes. The fleet's final transmission was a confused report of weapons that had no effect on targets that shouldn't exist. Admiral Zentok's last words were broadcast across Council space. They're not ships. They're not machines. God help us, they're not anything we understand. Fall back. Fall back to... Then silence. The loss of the 3rd Fleet sent shockwaves through the Council's military establishment. These were not primitive raiders or rogue artificial intelligences. The Devourers represented something completely outside the normal parameters of warfare. Conventional weapons passed through them without effect. Energy shields collapsed upon contact. Even antimatter warheads simply vanished into the expanding darkness that surrounded the entities. We need to evacuate the outer colonies, Ambassador Zethkar urged during an emergency session. His earlier satisfaction with the human departure had transformed into desperate fear. Get as many people away from the advance as possible. But the evacuations quickly proved futile. The Devourers moved faster than any known form of space travel. Refugee ships that had fled days ahead of the advancing darkness found themselves overtaken by entities that seemed to step through space itself. Ignoring the normal limitations of physics, Dr. Korthak worked frantically to understand what they were facing. Her analysis of the destruction patterns revealed terrifying details. The Devourers didn't simply destroy matter. They unmade it at a fundamental level. Space itself was damaged in their wake, leaving regions where the normal laws of physics no longer applied. They're not from our universe, she reported to the increasingly desperate council sessions. They exist partially in dimensions we can't perceive. That's why our weapons are useless. We're fighting shadows while the real enemy moves through spaces we can't even access. The refugee Vextel, now serving as an unofficial advisor on Devourer tactics, confirmed her analysis. The Warriors of Light understood this. Their weapons were designed to strike across dimensional barriers. They fought the Devourers in realms where matter and energy follow different rules. The humans had weapons capable of interdimensional combat? Admiral Korthak asked in amazement. Not just weapons. Ships that could pursue the Devourers into their hiding spaces. Warriors trained to fight in conditions that would destroy normal minds. Vexthel's damaged form trembled, but even they suffered terrible losses. The war in the deep dimensions consumed entire fleets. As more systems fell to the advancing darkness, panic spread through council space. Entire species attempted to flee beyond the galactic rim, only to discover that the Devourers had surrounded the galaxy like a living net. Escape was impossible. The trap had been closing for months while the council celebrated their newfound peace. The core worlds mobilized their defenses, but the results were the same everywhere. The proud First Fleet of the Altarian Collective lasted 12 minutes against a single Devourer entity. The ethereal defense matrix, a network of energy weapons that had protected their crystal worlds for millennia, was absorbed and turned against its creators. The Vorthak hive ships, each the size of a small moon, simply vanished into the spreading darkness. Zethkar's homeworld of Altair Prime was among the next targets. He watched from the council station as long-range sensors tracked the approach of something that registered as a moving void in space. The planet's defense platforms opened fire at maximum range, pouring enough energy into the target zone to vaporize a small asteroid. The weapons passed through empty space. The Devourer continued its approach unchanged. "Planetary evacuation is complete," reported the Altarian commander. "All government officials and essential personnel have been moved to deep space stations." But there was nowhere to run. As Zethkar watched in horror, his homeworld star began to dim, not gradually as if something was blocking its light, but instantly, as if the nuclear fires that had burned for billions of years were simply being switched off. "The star is destabilizing," Dr. Korthak reported, her voice hollow with shock. "Whatever they're doing, it's affecting stellar fusion at the quantum level." Altair Prime died in silence. No explosions, no dramatic destruction. The planet simply faded from existence, along with its star and every trace that the Altarian civilization had ever lived there. Even the historical records in the council archives began to change, as if reality itself was being edited to remove any evidence of what had been lost. The pattern repeated across hundreds of worlds. The Therma insect worlds went dark in sequence. The observers' hidden dimensional refugees were found and consumed. Ancient civilizations that had survived for millions of years vanished without trace. In desperation, the Council authorized the deployment of their most powerful weapons. Planet-killer missiles were launched at the advancing Devourers. Experimental quantum disruptors were activated. Even forbidden weapons from the earliest days of galactic warfare were brought out of storage. Nothing worked. The Devourers absorbed every attack, grew stronger from each attempt to stop them. They fed on energy itself, converting the Council's desperate defenses into fuel for their continued advance. "We're fighting an ecosystem," Dr. Korthak realized during one of the final military briefings. "The individual entities we can detect are just the visible parts of something much larger. They exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. We're trying to kill a forest by attacking individual leaves." Admiral Korthak nodded grimly. The humans understood this. That's why they never brought their war into Council space. They were protecting us from something we couldn't even perceive, let alone fight. As the core worlds began to fall, the Council made a final, desperate decision. Long-range communication arrays powered by the last remaining star fortresses broadcast a message toward the regions where human colonies might exist. The transmission was simple, stripped of all diplomatic protocol and pride. "We were wrong. Please help us. The galaxy is dying." But the nearest human settlements were months away, and the Devourers were already at the gates of Council Central, the capital system, seat of galactic government for 3,000 years, prepared for its final stand against enemies that consumed reality itself. The fire had come to the heart of civilization, and there was nowhere left to run. The council chambers were half empty when Captain Sarah Chen materialized in the center of the great assembly hall. She appeared without warning, without any ship registering on the sensors, without even a ripple in space to announce her arrival. One moment, the desperate delegates were arguing over evacuation protocols. The next moment, a human woman in a strange, dark uniform stood among them. "Jesus Christ," she said quietly, looking around at the decimated council membership. "You really let them all the way to the core." Director Halvek, now one of only 17 surviving council leaders, stared at her in shock. "Captain Chen? How did you—" "Your ship didn't register on any of our sensors." "That's because my ship isn't entirely in this dimension anymore," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "Had to travel through the deep layers to avoid the hunting packs. They've got this whole galaxy surrounded now." Ambassador Zethkar, his earlier arrogance replaced by desperate hope, leaned forward. "Captain, we sent messages to your colonies. Did you receive our transmission?" Chen's expression was cold. "Oh, we received it. Every human settlement from here to the Magellanic Clouds heard your plea for help." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The debate over whether to respond lasted about 30 seconds. "Then you'll help us?" Dr. Korthak asked. "I'm here, aren't I?" Chen gestured to the empty seats around the chamber. Though I have to say, this is about 50 systems too late for a rescue operation. She walked to the central display and activated it with a device that none of them recognized. The holographic projection showed the galaxy in real time, with red zones marking areas under Devourer control. Nearly 70% of Council space was already dark. This is what we've been fighting for 3 centuries, Chen said, her voice carrying the weight of generations of warfare. We call them the Void Hunters. Ancient entities that exist partially outside our reality. They feed on organized energy patterns, especially the kind generated by technological civilizations. 3 centuries? Halvek whispered. But first contact was only 57 years ago. First contact with you, Chen corrected. We've been dealing with these things since before your species developed interstellar travel. They come in cycles, usually every few thousand years, sweeping through different parts of the galaxy. We've been tracking their movements, predicting their targets, fighting them wherever they surface. She manipulated the display to show historical data. Red markers appeared throughout the galaxy, indicating previous Void Hunter incursions. The pattern was clear: systematic attacks on inhabited systems, followed by long periods of dormancy as the entities retreated to digest their accumulated energy. The Rim territories were their traditional hunting grounds, Chen continued. Sparse populations, isolated worlds, easy pickings. We established a perimeter defense network specifically to contain them there. Patrol routes, early warning systems, interdimensional monitoring stations. For 200 years, we kept them from penetrating deeper into the galaxy. Zethkar felt sick. The unauthorized military activities. The violations of council law. You were saving your ungrateful asses, Chen finished bluntly. Every time you accused us of violating territorial boundaries, we were actually preventing a hunting pack from reaching your worlds. Every time you demanded we explain our presence in forbidden sectors, we had just finished cleaning up another incursion. The refugee Vexthul, who had been listening in silence, suddenly spoke up. The barriers. The Warriors of Light maintained barriers between spaces. Chen nodded. Quantum boundary fields. They create friction between dimensions, making it harder for the hunters to phase in and out of normal space. Maintenance was constant work. Required ships and personnel stationed permanently in deep space. Why didn't you tell us? Dr. Korthak demanded. We tried, Chen replied sharply. For 50 years we filed reports with your Science Council about extra-dimensional threats. We submitted detailed analyses of Void Hunter technology. We begged you to establish joint monitoring stations in the outer sectors. She gestured to the surviving council members. You classified it all as human propaganda designed to justify military expansion. Admiral Korthak stepped forward.
Captain, what can we do now?
How do we fight them? Chen was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical display. In normal circumstances, you don't. Void Hunters in full feeding mode are essentially unstoppable using conventional physics. They exist across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. Destroying their local manifestations just forces them to shift to deeper levels. Then how did you contain them before? Interdimensional warfare, Chen said simply. Ships designed to phase shift between dimensional boundaries. Weapons that can strike targets across multiple layers of reality. Personnel trained to fight in conditions where up and down are suggestions and cause and effect is optional. She activated another section of her device. The display showed a new type of vessel, sleek and organic looking, its hull rippling with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. This is the TES Prometheus. My ship. 4th generation phase shift design equipped with quantum disruptors and reality anchors. One of about 30 vessels in the human deep strike fleet. 30 ships against this invasion? Halvek asked in disbelief. Oh, we've got more than 30 ships, Chen replied with a grim smile. We've been preparing for this scenario since the day you voted us out of council space. Every major human colony has been working on evacuation protocols and defensive measures. We knew this day would come. She turned to face the assembled council members directly. The question isn't whether we can fight the Void Hunters. The question is whether you're worth saving. The blunt statement sent shockwaves through the chamber. These were the leaders of galactic civilization, reduced to begging for help from the species they had expelled. What do you mean? Zethkar asked quietly. I mean that stopping a full-scale Void Hunter incursion requires sacrifices that your civilization isn't prepared to make, Chen explained. The weapons needed to drive them back would sterilize half the galaxy. The dimensional barriers required to contain them would cut off entire sectors from normal space. Millions of worlds would become permanently uninhabitable. She paused, letting the implications sink in. And that's assuming we succeed. There's always the possibility that we fail completely, in which case the galaxy becomes a feeding ground for the next 1,000 years. Dr. Korthak spoke up desperately. There has to be another option. There is, Chen said. Evacuation. We've prepared refuge zones beyond the galactic rim. Hidden bases in interdimensional space where survivors can wait out the feeding cycle. It would mean abandoning everything, but some of your people would live to rebuild in a few thousand years. The council chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the environmental systems. The choice was stark. Risk everything in a desperate battle that might save the galaxy, or accept exile and hope that future generations could return to reclaim their homes. How long do we have to decide? Halvek asked. Chen checked her temporal readings. The core systems will come under direct assault within 6 hours. After that, the hunters will be too deeply entrenched to dislodge. She looked around the chamber one more time. I need your answer now. The vote was swift and unanimous. Whatever the cost, they would not abandon their homes without a fight. Chen nodded grimly. Then I hope you're ready to learn what war really looks like. She activated her communication device. Prometheus to Fleet Command. Authorization Omega-77. Execute Protocol Burning Sky. Across human space, ships that had been waiting in interdimensional hiding suddenly materialized around the galaxy's core. The Deep Strike fleet had come home, bringing with them weapons designed to wound reality itself. The real war was about to begin.